Welcome back to Communicology. Have you ever wondered what's it like being an influencer? I have no idea. I don't want to be an influencer. But let's talk about what's the difference between an influencer and a content creator. Before we get into that, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate any help with the YouTube algorithms. But let's get back into the story here today. So what is an influencer? What is a content creator? Aren't they the same thing? I mean, somebody gets in front of a camera, talks, and puts it out there on YouTube and other social media platforms. Influencer, content, same thing, right? No, actually, at its heart, both of them are fundamentally different. They have the same technical, machinations. Like I'm literally in front of a camera. I have a microphone. I've got the camera. I've got the lights. And I'm recording myself and I'm putting it out there for social media. I'm not going through some kind of, Hollywood channel or anything like that. The news isn't regulating what I do. It's just me doing what I want to do. So when it comes to that aspect, that mechanical aspect, content creators, influencers, pretty much the same thing. I mean, you don't have to be obviously in a chair. You could be standing. You could be outside. You could be holding, your camera. You could have it mounted on a tripod. Whatever. All that stuff is the secondary thing. So in regard of creating content, content creators, influencers, same thing. But at the heart of what they are, their key foundational thing comes in the name. I mean, content creator is fairly simple. They create content. They create some kind of digital content for people to consume. Now, just like, going back 2,000 years into ancient Greece, whenever you speak, you either speak to persuade or speak to inform. It's the same thing with any kind of content creation work. There are lots of really good content creators out there who make videos just simply to inform you of something. Here's this new thing, here's this new concept, here's this whatever, and I'm going to show you what it is and how it works, all that good stuff. A lot of times you'll see even unboxing videos or tutorials for products, things like that. Non-common. I do concepts, so instead of having a physical thing to show you, except the occasional book that I hold up, it's basically just talking about concepts and theories and the philosophies of communication. So that's something I talk about. Now that's informative. Now on the persuasive side, of course, we could do that as well too. I could tell you not just about the concept, but why it matters, why you should also think about it, why you should maybe switch your view from this side to this side. I could do that as well and persuade you and go from there. In the end, what is the purpose? Well, my purpose is to get information to you, either to inform you or to persuade you about it, but to get you information, to tell you about communication because it's something I care about, something I'm interested in, and go from there. I'm not monetized. I don't have anything like that. You don't have to be monetized to be a content creator. You think of people who are content creators and making millions of dollars. Certainly not happening here. I'm not monetized at all. So it's just one of those things. I just enjoy doing it. I'm a professor. I teach. So at heart, I like teaching people. And communication is one of those things that's often misunderstood. So I thought, let's have a channel where I talk about communication, the study of communication, hence communicology. There we go. But what about an influencer? What's the difference there? Well, the idea of an influencer is that you strictly are aiming to persuade, and you're typically paid or sponsored to do so. So I could have, this is a Logitech mouse. I could, have a whole episode based on this mouse and tell you about the features and why you should buy one and all that good fun stuff. If Logitech was sponsoring me to do that, great. Then I get some extra money and everyone's happy. But the next day I could be, showing a Microsoft mouse or some other brand of mouse and whatever. So influencers are paid people who their primary job is to persuade you about the product that they're selling or that they're selling on behalf of a company. Now, isn't that like an infomercial? Well, yes. I mean, if you go back, and especially people who are older, remember what it's like sometimes surfing the television at 2 a.m. and there's all of these things that are on TV called infomercials, which is a 30-minute long commercial. Now, it wasn't like we had these two actors and we're watching it like we do with most commercials. It was two people or one person, and other people might have come in and go as it goes, but just one person talking about the product, going over all its benefits and everything. It's a long form commercial where the person is doing this long testimony and exposition of what it is. That's the start of our influencer culture that we really see today, the infomercial. We grew up hating infomercials, so that's one of those reasons why I saw a lot of Gen Xers are like, ew, influencers, who wants that? Because we have this thought of infomercials stuck in our head, maybe deep in our subconscious, and that's why we kind of react to it. But the thing is the whole purpose is that they're paid spokespeople for the company. Now, they don't work for the company. They're independent contractors. They do their own thing. If they work for the company, then we'd say, well, yeah, you of course you love the product. You work for the company, which is why typically we don't tend to get drawn by those commercials whenever people are selling something and it's a person from the company. Like, trust me, I like my own product. It's like, I would hope you do. Now, so they hire some, quote, outside person. Now, an influencer, their whole job is to, look pretty and sound smart. So that's the whole thing with them, and that they have a really good presence, and that they have really good lighting, they have a really good personality, and they spend all that time working on those marketable skills to be able to say, I can generate, this content for you that you would then be able to put all over your social media channels. It'd be on my social media channels. You pay me X, and we'll make it happen. Now, of course, the key thing that people have to trade when it comes to that is exposure. So, and this is the same thing as goes back in the ancient advertising days. I mean, the two things that drive advertising in any kind of medium is subscription and advertising, rates itself. So, if you have a newspaper with high subscription, you can charge high advertising rates, and so you can say, look, if you want to advertise in our newspaper, there are 10,000 people a day that see our newspaper, so we can charge you this much. But if 100,000 people can see it, we can now charge you this much. And that's why Super Bowl commercials are so expensive, because you have, hundreds of millions of people around the world watching it at any given moment. That's an incredible audience. So you see this wide collective of commercials that cover the gamut of different products and services during the Super Bowl, because the most eyes are on it. So that's why the airtime for a commercial is $8 million just for the airtime, not even the production value of everything else, just the airtime. So, so influencers, they can look pretty, they can sound smart, but at the end of the day, they have to have subscribers. So whenever I ask for subscribers, I'm not trying to be an influencer, and it's one of those things where I just want to share the word about what I'm doing. Influencers need the subscribers, and a lot of times you can pay to get more subscribers, and you can promote your channel to get more subscribers, because it's the lifeblood of the influencer. Because if the influencer only has 500 subscribers, and they can show, look, 10,000 people have viewed my content this week, that's not nearly as much as someone who has 1 million subscribers, and their content is seen millions of times each week. I mean, you can't charge people much money if not many eyes are going to be on it. But if you have 5 million views each week, you can charge a lot more money for your content. So that's where you see the big difference between the two. One is actively trying to persuade. They might act like they're informing, but at the end of the day, they want you to buy the product, and they teach you a call to action sometime in there to go out and check it out and to buy it. And that's where it slides from informative into persuasive speaking. So that's the big change. So then from there, you start, really wrestling with the concept. Is this something that I want in my life? Well, think about, the purposes why you use the internet. Why do you use, like, say, for example, YouTube? Why do you use it? Why do you use Instagram? Why do you use TikTok? A lot of times it's meant for, entertainment, like a lot of that mindless scrolling that we do, a lot of times that's purely entertainment. We're not actively seeking information, but there are a lot of times that we actively want information. So we go out and seek it, and we try to find it, and then we we end up landing in the laps of one or two people, either influencers or content creators. And you can all, pretty much tell right away which one you are, where you're in it. One is super polished and one is a little bit more homemade, I guess, for lack of better terms, and one is a little bit more glamorous and one is a little bit, rougher around the edges. So, I shoot my videos in one take. I keep the mistakes. If I cough, if I hiccup, whatever, I leave it in there. I just don't change things much. I don't have official merch. I just wear whatever shirt I feel like wearing that day. And, I just shoot it in the same location. I don't go to any kind of exotic locales or anything like that. I'm a content creator. I'm creating content. It's for you to consume. If you agree with me, great. If you don't, that's cool too. And that's even how I end every video. So at the end of the day, I want you to learn more about this material. And if you don't believe me, you can go do your own research and see, yeah, I think I agree with this other content creator instead of Dr. Talbert. No skin off my back. I just want you to be thinking of it, be aware of it, because I think that, how we communicate as humans is important. So this is why I do it. Now, when you move into the world of the influencer, obviously they're going to be much more dolled up, have their makeup, have the perfect clothing on, and and this goes for men and women. They're very slick, and because they've got an image to sell as much as a product to sell. I'm just doling away information. They're selling image. Now, this isn't to say it's an awful thing, because when you want to say I want to go find information on the internet, well, like I said, you can go to a content creator, you can go to an influencer. An influencer is going to want you to go the way that they're telling you, and that shouldn't be surprising. That's not an awful thing. That's a function of commercials. Whenever a company has a commercial that pops up on your social media feed, or that you catch on television, or the commercials that play before a movie, whatever. Anytime you come across a commercial, a billboard, it doesn't matter. They want you to buy their thing. I mean, duh. I mean, that makes sense, right? So an influencer is going to try to do what their title says. Influence. I am creating content. If you agree with me, that's really cool. That's kind of neat. And you give me a like, and you maybe share my post. Maybe you even subscribe to my channel. Cool, awesome, yay. But an influencer, they are literally trying to influence you to make a decision. That's a commercial. And they might not think of themselves as walking commercials, but that's what, by definition, that's what they are. They are trying to show you a product that they have been paid to cover, paid to endorse, and get you hyped about it. So here's this thing. We're going to put it out in front of my 5 million viewers. That way you can, buy this thing. Because think of from a standpoint of a business. I want people to hit my business up. My sales are kind of flat. I'd like to see some kind of more traction. I've tried putting commercials out there. Nothing is really happening. Well, here is somebody, an influencer, who has 5 million views each week. 5 million views would be insane to try to get, from your standpoint of having your product seen. So what's that worth? If I give this influencer $1,000 to cover my product, then all of a sudden I have 5 million views of my product. That doesn't mean all 5 million turn into purchases, obviously, because you don't buy everything you see a commercial. But influencers are very good at getting you all excited about it. Because again, commercials, you get 30 seconds, maybe 15, or like if you're like me, when you're watching the YouTube commercials, you're waiting for that skip thing to come on so you can hurry up and get past it after 5 seconds because you want to move on to the content. But people actively seek an influencer. They actively seek what this person says, what they think about a product. So they're already primed. Like, I already like you as a salesperson. I already like you and the way you deliver things, and I already trust what you're going to say. So that's an amazing amount of victory already. Whereas commercials, we go, not interested. But influencers, we already have bought in like 75-80% of the way. We just have to decide, do I want to buy this thing or not? And their job is to make it very convincing to get you that remaining 25% that, yeah, I do want to buy that thing. So is it worth $1,000? Is it worth $10,000? Is it worth $100,000 to pay this influencer to get my product, my service in front of 5 million willing viewers? I mean, that sounds like a fairly well a no-brainer in most business aspects, which is why there's such a huge craze towards moving towards influencers. I have tons and tons of students who come, like prospective students who come like, what do you want to do? I want to be an influencer. All right, well, go do it. Well, you don't have to go to college for that. Just go do it. You just jump right in, just buy yourself a camera, get some lights, and jump in and go do it. But the truth part of it is it's a lot of it is acting. So they're good at acting. That doesn't mean that they're not genuine, but that's a big problem that comes with influencers is, are they genuine? Because they're being paid. And people, I think, should know that. If you don't know that, that's kind of weird, but you should know that they're getting paid. So if you're paying me $1,000 to endorse Logitech mice, so I'm going to talk about it. And boy, these mice are great. This is a wonderful mouse. You should buy one of these mice too. You should know that I'm getting paid, but my job is to be a very slick actor, a salesman to sell this mouse. On content creator side, the only thing that we have is authenticity. Why would I want to tune in and listen to this guy talk about communication every day? Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you do. Granted, production value does matter. I mean, if I was holding like a real shaky camera, it'd be hard to see. If I had a lousy microphone and the audio was terrible, it'd be hard to listen to. If I didn't have good lighting, it would look really weird. If I didn't have a nice backdrop, maybe that wouldn't. This makes me look more scholarly. Look at all these books, all the good fun stuff. But it's one of those things that, why do I want to listen to this guy? Well, what comes down to it, the only thing I have is authenticity. So I happen to love this field. I happen to love the idea of teaching this field to other people. I love the idea of other people learning and then learning communication concepts. That's what I have to offer. And if that's not you, well, you're probably not listening this long anyway. If it is you, then here you are. But it's one of those things that, that's all I have, and it's my authenticity. If I was not interested in communication, it'd be hard to teach it. It'd be hard to sell it. Whenever I teach my students about the idea of an ethical speaker, according to Aristotle, you have to have aret, eunoia, and phronesis. Aret is virtue, be a virtuous speaker. Eunoia, you have to care about your audience. You have to have goodwill towards your audience. And phronesis is practical wisdom. So this isn't sitting on the mountaintop, chanting wisdom. This is practical wisdom. So in other words, if you've ever had a conversation with somebody and about 2 or 3 minutes in, you realize they don't know what they're talking about, they're lacking that practical wisdom. So I stay in my lane. I know this stuff. I talk about this stuff. So that's it. If I tried all of a sudden tried to have a podcast about molecular biology, it would fall apart real fast because I don't know that stuff. It would look like I'm winging it. It would sound like I'm winging it, and my authenticity would be shot, and no one would want to listen. So the key thing is this person authentic? And that's why we tend to get drawn towards it. But it's also why people tend to either pick certain influencers and flee from other influencers, because if you're, to be an influencer, to be influential, you have to at least appear, for the sake of the broadcast, to be authentic. Now, I don't think it's authentic at all when they say, oh, try this beverage. It's the best tasting beverage I've ever had. And then a week later, they're doing a commercial for another beverage and they say, try this beverage. It's the best tasting beverage I've ever had. And like, didn't you say that about the other one? Now, it could be the second one is better. Now it is the best. But, the problem with influencers and any other kind of paid endorsers that you typically see in commercials, do you really think that? Or are you saying that because you're paid to think that? On the content creation side, all I have is my authenticity. And if you don't think that I'm being honest about it, then you'll turn away and you'll click away. You go watch somebody else. So that's one of those things that you see a big difference in, is the trust level that comes into the difference between a content creator or an influencer. And It's up to you then to decide and be a discerning, consumer. And at the end of the day, that's all it really comes down to is, you know, how discerning are you as a consumer? Influencers, I don't have a problem with them. I don't like the name influencers; just sounds creepy. But the idea of an influencer, they're paid advertisers. If you know that going in, and if you can detach your emotion, and rationalize, do I want this, and does this person seem like they're telling me the truth? Have at it. God bless you. And then content creators. Does this person seem like they know what they're talking about? Are they delivering it from a position of integrity, and like they seem to care, and they seem to like what they do and know what they're talking about, and have everything else secondary, like the trappings, then pay attention and listen to them and give them the clicks and the likes and the subscriptions. At the end of the day, that's really what makes the difference between the two. Now, that's not to say, of course, that I mentioned that I'm an unpaid person. I mean, that's true. Now, it's possible that sometime in the future I might have 5 million subscribers. I don't think so, but it's possible, of course, right? And then, sure, yeah, I would get monetized content, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm still interested in this material. I'm not trying to sell it to you. Like, I don't have the Richard Talbert handbook that you can buy for just $19.95 and just send in your PayPal information and we'll be good. I don't have merch to push. I don't have corporate sponsorship to worry about. It's just me, which is a nice thing. I don't have to worry about crossing any borders or stepping on any toes of any companies or corporations or anything like that, because no one sponsors me. I'm totally just doing this on my own. So again, tuning in influencers, content creators, they both mechanically do the same thing, but when it comes down to the intention, the motive, the delivery, they're two different things. So next time you're cruising your social media, like right now, and you're watching different people, just kind of look for the difference. Like, yeah, this is an influencer. This is a content creator. And there's your difference. And, enjoy them for what they do, and like the ones you like, and subscribe to the ones you like, and scroll on for the ones you don't. So thank you very much for tuning in today. That's what I have for you. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you didn't like what you heard, that's okay. Thanks for tuning in anyway. But I'll see you next time on Communicology.